Hey everybody, Big Toad here, and welcome back to my studio. Today, in this video, we're going to continue to work on that 6 foot by 3 foot painting of an Idaho Butte and Foothills. I'm going to work on putting some snow caps on the mountains and ridges, and then repaint the road. I want to make it a little lighter, and also add some details to some rocks, build out the remaining rocks I have in here, the big stones. I want to repaint those and put some final touches on the fence posts. So let's go ahead and get started. So the snow I'm putting on is mainly titanium white. I put a little bit of cobalt blue in there and a speck of the dioxazine purple, just to give it a little purplish tinge to it. You may not even be able to tell, but that's why you don't want to use pure white. Although I may take and hit a couple spots with some really close to pure white just to make them pop a little bit and give the snow some more texture. But I'll have to think about that and look at it as it gets closer along. I'm using a very small brush here. It's a round brush, and I think it's size 6. And I am taking the paint and using a lot of linseed oil so it comes off the brush easily. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so you can see me apply this paint closer. With that thinned down paint using linseed oil, I'm loading the brush pretty heavily. And I'm laying the brush on its side, rolling and turning the brush in my fingers so I get the paint off of all sides of the brush. I'm just lightly applying it to the mountain and allowing in some places just a hint of it to come off, pressing a little harder, sometimes just to apply more of the paint. So I'm allowing the brush to do the work. I'm not using the tip of the brush and trying to be precise with it. I'm dragging the brush along. Now the paint in the mountain, that gray there, is pretty dry at this point. That's fine. What that does though, it allows some of the texture of the heavier brush strokes from applying that mountain paint so that I break up the color a little bit as I'm putting them down. So I think it's making a nice look to the snow. A lot of times on mountains, you'll see painters use their palette knife to put the snow on, and I considered that, but that works in my experience. That works better for me personally when the paint on the mountain itself is still wet. And then I would use the palette knife, but in this case, I think the effect turns out quite well. I do have my tablet open with a photograph of the butte with a snow on it to give me kind of guidance in how I want to make this snow look, see how it lays on the mountain. Try to duplicate closely some of the ravines and ridges where the snow lies, and to give it a little more reality and resemblance to the mountain. If I'm just doing a random mountain, maybe I wouldn't do that, but it's nice to have a reference in this because snow on mountains is kind of like clouds. You can get carried away with it and ruin it pretty quick if you're not careful. So having a little guidance from a real photograph gave me some confidence and comfort. It made me feel a little better about working on it. So I didn't overdo it, just kind of duplicate what I saw on the photo. And the photograph I'm using for reference in the mountain, I took that in at the beginning of April. And, it would snow overnight. And then in a couple days, the snow would be melted off or nearly melted off. Then it might snow overnight again. And in a few days or a week, it would melt off. And so you'd get these splatterings of snow up on the butte during the spring as the snow comes and goes on the mountain. So it can look very beautiful when it's got that snow on it. And for my painting here, that because the butte can be the way it catches the light, it can be very just it's hard to see any detail in it from a distance. The snow, I think, really brought the mountain to life, and gave it some depth and contour that it didn't have before. So doing a spring or a fall of the Butte is an ideal thing. I think if you got too much in the winter, it would do the exact opposite. It would be so much white, and it would cover it so much you wouldn't really have a painting. So I think that the fall and the spring when the snow's just falling and hasn't fully blanketed is probably the perfect time for a good painting of the Butte. That's about where I stop working on the snow. I do a little touch up here and there with it, but for the most part, I've got the snow finished. I always reserve the right to come back in and make tweaks later. Like I said, maybe bringing in some more pure white on a couple spots just to make it pop and make the snow just really pop out in some places, maybe where the sun's hitting it just right and get a little sparkle off of it. As snow can do sometimes. Now, these three rocks you see here, one by the lower fence post and another large one up by the sagebrush with a little one in front of it, I reworked those. When I blocked those in, I went more gray. And gray is more of a granite type rock, which you see in the higher elevations more in the traditional mountains. But when you're down in these foothills below, like this butte, there's a lot of lava rocks and things like that. So we have a lot of orange and brownish and rocks that maybe look like that. And so again, I wanted to bring that in. I also felt like the gray rocks just feel out of place in my mind. Well, that's because you don't see a lot of those granite type rocks in this area of the high mountain desert around the butte. So I used some burnt umber, a little bit of the Naples yellow, some burnt sienna, and I think I just occasionally would bring in a little yellow ochre here or there to maybe give it a slightly different edge to it. And I just massaged all my rocks to kind of take on that reddish brownish with yellow, little Naples yellow type highlights in them. Now I take some of the lightest of the color I used on the rocks, and I'm going to apply that to these fence posts to try to give them some shape and texture and create a roundness to them. And the sun, of course, is coming from the right, so I'm going to put the lighter side on that. So let me show you what I've done there. Now look at that right fence post, and I used that same number 6 round brush, and I took one of the lighter colors I was using on the rocks, like I said, and I just kind of rolled and dragged the brush down on its side, never using the tip, just to create this random pattern, and I think it looks really great so far. And here in this picture, you can see the 3 largest fence posts in the painting right together, and how I just dragged that color down through there, and it gave them some real, I think, vitality to them and life to them and ruggedness. And I repeat this process on all the fence posts, at least the nearer ones. Some of the further ones away, you're not going to see this light at all, so I left them alone. And I'm trying to keep the edges of the fence posts soft while I do this. I then came back in with some of the darker colors, and just where I had too much light, I was able to break that up a little bit. And fence posts are really dark when you view them in photos and such, in life as well, until you get right up close to them, and then you can see some of the light areas. So I don't want too much light, so I went back over them and painted in some dark colors where I had too much light. And this made them, I think, nice as well. They were a little too light before, needed a little less light. So just kind of took ultramarine blue and burnt sienna to make up a nice dark color to darken those fence posts up a little bit. I also took that same mixture of dark using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. I wanted to reinvigorate some of the dark shadows and darken up the dark side of the trees. What I like to do too is lose edges, especially where the trees meet the ground or the sagebrush comes out of the ground and there's a shadow there. I like to extend really dark color just a little bit further away so that you kind of lose the edge of where does the root system end and the ground begin. So I do some of that. And again, I reinstitute some darker colors on some of my rocks as well to help them stand out a little better. A lot of times I think painters don't use enough dark colors. And the dark colors are just as important as the light colors, as the high chroma colors. You want that dark to really set off and contrast with your lighter colors. And so I like to use some really dark, rich color of an ultramarine blue and burnt sienna when I can to really make my brighter colors pop. And things like this fence post to really set into the painting. This sagebrush I'm working on here and the fence post to the right are good examples of how I lose the edge where the roots begin and the ground starts. You see how I'm taking that dark color that's part of the stem of the sagebrush and I'm pulling it out away. And the same with this fence post, just bringing it a little darker because the shadow is going to be darkest really close to that object anyway. And I think it adds some realism and some excitement to the paintings when you do that type of thing. The little details like that matter. Being careful not to overdo it. I take that same dark color and reinvigorate some of the shadows really close to the posts. I kind of tapping it in loosely there, you see. Like I said, do not overdo this. Too much and it'll make your paintings you look silly. But by carefully using these darker colors where you can, I think it just adds some life and vitality to your painting. And I think this type of detail is especially important in a painting like this because there's not a lot of trees or forests or objects out there casting long shadows. So you have to take advantage of the shadows you do have to show the light and where the light's coming from. You don't want it to feel like there's just light washed over everything. You want to emphasize these shadows because you have so few in this type of painting in this big open meadow with hardly a tree in it. Good shadows make good light. And you notice sometimes I'm breaking up the dark, so I'm not putting dark everywhere behind this rock, but allowing it to look like there's grasses growing up in front of the shadow that are out in the light between me and the shadow. So be careful not to just do a dark line or a dark patch everywhere. Allow the grasses or whatever other objects to break up that shadow like I have here. So now I'm going to shift my focus to the road here. And mostly in the road, I'm going to be using, again, some of the same colors, some burnt sienna and some Naples yellow, some yellow ochres, and maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue to darken things up a little bit. First, I want to establish some darker shadows along the edge of the road here. That's going to be shadows that because the grasses along the road are taller than the road, so they're going to obviously cast some shadows onto the road. So I want to establish those dark colors first along that right edge of the road. And I'm still using that number 6 round, just dragging it along on its edge and basically going almost with burnt sienna, except down here. Again, I've used burnt sienna and a little bit of ultramarine blue to darken that up. I want this bottom edge to be pretty dark, so I'm gonna add in, you can see a lot more color down here as far as that dark color to create that darkness there. Again, that's another one of the things I like to do along the bottom edges and in the corners of the lower edge. I like to bring in some dark colors. It kind of pushes the eye in and keeps the eye from dropping off the bottom of your painting. And another thing you don't see while I'm editing out these videos is how often I step back and move away from my painting. And I did that, and I saw that I wanted to put some darker colors in up around the trees and the rock up in this corner as well. And always step back and look and observe and bounce around your painting. You don't have to focus all on one area. That tunnel vision of focusing in one area can it's going to do more harm than good. It will cause you to overwork an area and underwork other areas and throw your paintings out of balance. You need to always take the whole painting into consideration while you're working in a single area. I also need to lighten this road a little bit. It's a little dark. I mean, I like the way it looks now, but the customer for this painting thought it should be lighter. And I totally agree. It looks good, but in a natural environment, the road is a lighter shade of this kind of reddish color. A lot of reddish hued roads with Naples yellow type effect. So that's what I'm using here. I'm going to use Naples yellow, and I'm going to really lighten up a burnt sienna. And there's a couple places I might throw in a little yellow ochre, but mostly for this road, I'm going to use Naples yellow and burnt sienna and various mixtures to create texture and contour to the road. Again, I wanted to create the illusion of a hump down the middle of the road where the tires don't run. The tires run on each side of that hump, and so you get a little grooves and dips in on the sides of the road where the tires go, and down the middle you get a little ridge on these older ungroomed back roads in Idaho. I am using the number 10 filbert in natural hog bristles to work on this road, using its edge and kind of scumbling and dragging the paint around, allowing the paint to mix on the canvas to blend it or blend it together, not over blend it, but kind of just mush the paints together to create different effects of ridges and dips and a rough contoured road effect. As always, keeping in mind where the sunlight's coming from. So I got to remember to add a little darker color on the left side of the hump in the middle, as well as maintaining light colors on the left edge of the road and on the right edge of the hump in the middle. And I'm going to try to cut in a little bit into that dark shadowy effect I put on the right side of the road without messing it up. So here on the bottom, I'm starting to bring in some more darker color. The burnt sienna, I'm applying some dipping right straight into the burnt sienna to start creating the effect of a darker shadow there. Again, I want the bottom edge of the painting to be a little darker to keep the eye from drifting off the bottom. I think it's just a nice effect. What can I say? It's one of the things I like to do in my paintings. It makes me feel good. That way I don't fall out the bottom of my painting while I'm working on it. So again, using the burnt sienna, dipping straight into it with that number 10 hog bristle, and just not too much though. You can see I'm never using a lot of color at once. I'm trying to be careful. I'd rather dip more times than necessary and go back than overpaint it and have to lighten it up again. And I'm dipping again right into the very edge of the burnt sienna. So I'm not loading the whole brush, just the edge of it. So I can put a little burnt sienna on and then massage it into the road. Again, I want to create the shadow on this side of the hump, on the left side of the hump in the middle, because that's going to be away from the sunlight. And the big brush is what you want to use here. Otherwise, you're going to get too structured, too even. You'll get too much detail, and you want the illusion of detail here. So use that big brush, especially if you're on a giant painting like this. I try to use the big brush as much as I can. I did that on the sage brush. Obviously, I used a smaller brush, but I wanted to capture a particular look with that as well. You can see I'm bringing in that, again, more burnt sienna to create these little ridges of darkness where there's like little rivulets in the road, maybe darker soil, maybe a little more shadow, and just creating some texture and contour to the road. Anytime you're doing this type of thing, whether it's snow on a mountain or a road like this, it's easy to overpaint, and you just don't want to do that. So the final touch here on the road is I'm going in with some burnt sienna on the brush and just softening up the edges between the lighter color and the darker color along the edge of the road there that I put in. Just want to make that soft. So I'm going to clean that up a little bit. And I think the road looks a lot nicer now. So, hey, thanks for joining me in this video. I appreciate it a lot. I hope you learned something. And thanks again. This is the Big Toad, and I am out.